everyone, I'm Kristine Leadbetter. I'm here today with Amy Vodarek, who is a executive coach, facilitator, and author of Good Enough. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Amy.
I'm really happy to be here.
I'm such a fan of yours, you know this. You did an incredible event for the DeGroote Women's Professional Network last year, and you've been on quite a journey with releasing your book. So Good Enough. So tell me a little bit about this.
Okay, so yes, a journey for sure. So it was about 3.5 years in the making, and we interviewed over 150 women, and then did a big survey of over 250 women.
Wow.
So we got lots of data to mine, and we really pulled out some really great themes. And the purpose of the book was to really explore the mindset of, or the experience of not feeling good enough, and how it gets in our way of going after what we really want to do, who we want to become, and the kind of influence and impact we want to have. The book's focused on women. We interviewed and talked with over 350 women professionals, and these women were so generous with their time and sharing their story, and we asked the same 5 questions in every interview to try to get at the heart of the experience of not good enough, the voice of the inner critic, and who's judging us. Why do we feel judged? And the interesting thing was, we're our worst judge. We're the ones judging ourselves. So that's a little bit about the book, and the purpose is to start a conversation.
Gotcha. So unpack that for us a little bit. Good enough. Yeah. What is that feeling that you're sort of addressing that you just kind of touched on, but your inner critic that you were talking about?
It's that experience that happens when we're in a moment, usually of taking a next step, of putting ourselves in a place of vulnerability or risk, and suddenly this feeling of, who am I to do this? And do I have the skills to do this? And am I qualified? Maybe I need more certifications. It's really this hesitation that we're suddenly not good enough to do what we want to do, to fulfill the commitments we already have. It can be around our body. We heard that quite a bit actually with women, that when they didn't feel good about their body, the story of good enough got quite loud. So it's an experience that we have, and the challenge is to manage it when it shows up, because if we can't manage it, it really stops us in our track from going forward to take care of the things that matter to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the pieces in the book too that you talk about is it was often very women who were experts in their fields that then would have these moments.
Yeah.
So they could be at the top of their game.
That's right.
And still feel inadequate.
That was actually what was just so humbling and shocking to us as we did the interviews. Was we were sitting looking at these incredible women and all that they'd achieved, and then they would start to reveal these stories of where they don't feel good enough, or how their inner critic voice gets really loud and chirps at them, and they won't take that next risk, and yet they're so competent and they've accomplished so much, and the outside view is they've got it all together. And I think one of the risks is, when we feel not good enough, is that we put up this mask that we've got it all together, rather than taking more intentional action to manage the feeling and take next steps forward.
So how do we recognize when we're feeling this feeling of not being good enough, or our inner critic? Like, how do we recognize that?
That's such a good question, Kristine, because if we aren't aware, then we just sort of fall victim to the experience, and we can't move in the direction that we want to move, right? We're just sort of overwhelmed by this feeling that we have, and we retreat. We actually retreat, we get small, we don't take the steps we want to take, we don't speak up in meetings. So the first step is really awareness.
Okay.
You know, self-awareness, learning to recognize that, oh wow, hold on, I see this, I recognize this feeling of not good enough. Once we can see it, then we can have a practice that we engage in to help us manage the moment, so that we can then decide and be in a place of choice. Do I want to listen to this inner critic voice and this feeling of not good enough, or do I actually want to choose to listen to my wiser, more abundant self?
Right, and that's a place of positivity that we all want to be in. So how do we deal with this then? So
I mentioned the word practice, and I mentioned it intentionally because, just like when we learn to drive a car, we had to pay attention to so many things, right? And then over time, it became like muscle memory, and we weren't paying attention to all the details. We could actually listen to tunes, and enjoy the driving, rather than feeling like, oh, there's so much to pay attention to. Well, that's muscle memory. That's also, becoming more intuitive and instinctive in how we operate the car. So embodied learning.
Okay.
So a practice is really embodied learning. And so a practice that's really helpful in this situation, and I share this with my clients often, is to notice, the first thing, right? Self-awareness. And when we notice we're in that moment of being triggered, then we know something's at risk for us. We're at risk of feeling humiliated, ashamed, embarrassed. Our dignity might be at stake. So pay attention to that. Take a deep breath. Feel the ground under your feet. Literally.
Okay.
This isn't trivial, because when we feel the ground under our feet, like I just put both my feet on the ground now, we feel supported, right? There's something bigger. We're a part of something bigger too. We're part of a bigger picture than just this moment. Again, take the deep breath and then decide, what is it I really care about? Do I really care about moving in this direction? Or I'm not sure, and the inner critic's going to win in this moment. When we move towards what we care about, we have more courage, we have more confidence, and we can choose to move in the direction that's going to help us take care of what matters to us. And a little caveat here, that if we don't choose, because we're not perfect, right? We're human. If the inner critic wins or the story of not good enough wins, let it go. Okay, this time I didn't move. But if it becomes a pattern where we can't move and we get stuck in this cycle of not being able to choose what we want, that's a really good awareness to say, maybe I need some help. Maybe I need to look towards a mentor or hire a professional coach or find that trusted advisor that I can really talk this through. They can ask questions and poke some holes in this story of not good enough.
Yeah, really interesting. And I've heard you also talk about, so your inner critic is a witch.
Did I say that?
And I think I've heard a different term outside of witch, but and how you know, the awful things that we really say to ourselves that you would never say to other people. And so this is a really serious issue that we're talking about, and how much it really affects your lives. It really affects your confidence. It affects, you know, your activities throughout your day and the way you behave in different situations. So what are some tips that you have to keep your inner critic at bay?
I love this. It's proactive, right? Instead of reacting and responding when it shows up, let's see how we can hold it from showing up. And I think I did call it quite a nasty name when I talked about it last time, because she can be so nasty, especially when we're feeling really vulnerable, right? Especially when it's something to do with, oh, I messed up, I didn't handle that well. That inner critic voice can just use language and tone of voice that we would never actually use to anyone else. She's our harshest critic, really. So to keep it at bay, actually one of the things we learned in the book was overwhelm. Okay, so when we did the survey, over 80% of women said they very often felt overwhelmed. In every interview, the experience of feeling overwhelmed came up. So we've got more on our plates than we're managing, and the experience of overwhelm and feeling exhausted, depleted, and not taking care of ourselves actually makes us feel more vulnerable to the story of not good enough and the inner critic. So the first thing I would recommend is self-care. Taking care of ourselves. And you know, I actually want to address this a little bit. It's not just to put on our oxygen mask so that we can take care of everyone else, it's so we can take care of ourselves for the sake of our own humanity and well-being. And then we'll take care of other things. But it's not just to take care of everyone else. So I think it's really important to pay attention to that. So if we see that we're on a track towards overwhelm, it's to take a pause and say, hold on. You know, now I'm going to be more vulnerable to the inner critic, to stories of not good enough. What can I do to kind of take better care of myself and let go of some of these commitments?
Yeah, a great reminder.
Yeah. The other thing is to talk about it. You know, when we talk about feeling not good enough, and you and I have had a few conversations around this topic, and I've had it with several women, it takes the power out of the story. And I should say men and women, because actually I've had lots of male clients who have talked about this with me too. They might use some different language and it might show up for different reasons, but it's almost always when something is at stake for us, either our integrity, our sense of dignity, our sense of self-value and worth. When those things are at stake, then it shows up.
Well, and to your point, often when you talk about it, you realize how nonsense, you know, the things that he's saying are, because people put it into perspective for you. And kind of bring you back to reality and actually know you are an expert at this, or you are capable. So great tip.
Right, and we want to make sure that we're sharing it too with someone who we really trust, who isn't going to just sort of placate us and pat us on the back and say, there, it's okay, you're fine. You know, we want someone who's going to say, tell me more about that, and let's identify your strengths and see what's actually underneath this story, so that we can move and manage with it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing those tips with us and for being here today.
Yeah.
So what's next for you?
That's a good question. So we just had our first workshop using the book as a springboard in March in Toronto, and thank you. You were part of our panel, and it was such a good
Pleasure
day.
to be there.
It was such a good day. So the workshops are really to put women in conversation around feelings of not good enough, give them some opportunity to receive some coaching, to listen to other women's stories on how they manage it. And I just want to add, I'm using the word manage, not kick it to the curb.
Okay.
Because I really believe that as human beings, there's always vulnerable moments. If we're growing and learning, we're always going to be putting ourselves in a place of letting go where we're comfortable. So it's really learning to dance with it. So these workshops are helping women to find strategies to do that, to build a community around it, to be able to talk about it in a safe place. So we're hoping to launch another one, perhaps over the summer, definitely in the fall. I've got a women's leadership growth group, a virtual one, that I'm going to be kicking off very soon, so stay tuned.
Wow, lots
I'm
going
really
on.
looking at women in power and women in leadership and how we can generate power in a very genuine way rather than in a way that maybe we've been taught in the past.
Right.
Right.
Well, all good things and all
Yeah.
important conversations. So for those interested in your book, where can they pick up their copy?
Amazon.ca.com and also at Full Circle Publishing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Great.
much again for being
Oh,
here
it was
today, Amy.
great.
I'm a
Thank
huge
you.
fan of yours
Oh,
and
thank you.
really appreciate the work that you're
Thank you.
doing.
And you
So-
too. This is a great show. I'm so happy to be here.